Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown. Welcome to Protest and Promise. It's an opportunity for young Angelenos to actually get some information from civic leaders about issues that are important to them. Today we're going to be talking all about elections. We blink and it'll be time for elections, so I know there are a lot of questions about how we can participate and how important youth voices are in this very important election year. So first I'd like to introduce our wonderful panel of youth. When I say your name, just give us a little wave. Angelina, nice to see you. Andrea. Hello. Oliver. Jewel. Evan. And down in the corner we have Sean. And we're delighted to be joined by two wonderful people who have come to give us a lot of great information. I'd like to welcome Holly Wolcott, who is the city clerk for the city of Los Angeles, as well as Sara Gonzalez, who's the project coordinator, also working in the city clerk's office. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, so first, I have a question for all of our youth. How many of you are registered to vote? Raise your hand. All right. How many of you are too young to register to vote at this moment? All right, so I'm going to go after Jewel. Jewel, I'm wondering, why aren't you registered to vote if you are old enough to do so? Or do you need to know how to do it?
No, usually they come to my school and they have us do it, but because COVID, we weren't able to register that way.
Ah, okay. So Holly, this is a great opportunity for you to kind of let Jewel know what's going to happen in situations like that.
Well, the good news is you can always go online to the California Secretary of State, and you can always register to vote there. They do pre-register if you are 16 years and older. You can pre-register at 16 and 17, and you can register to vote at 18. So Sara can probably give a little bit more detail as far as what the actual website is, but I can tell you can go to the Secretary of State website and register at any time.
Yeah. Jewel, I will say that we are missing you. We go to hundreds of high schools a year and do in-classroom and auditorium presentations and even set up mock elections so that youth can kind of go through the process and see what a polling place is going to feel like and maybe get those jitters out, cast a fake ballot, but get a real I voted sticker. And we're really sorry that we can't do that right now. But like Holly mentioned, you can go to the Secretary of State site. So that is sos.ca.gov. And you'll just find the link there for register to vote. And like Holly said, if you're 16 or 17, you can just click that and it'll pre-register you to vote, meaning when you turn 18, you'll already be registered and you won't have to go through that process again. Or of course, you can click 18 and you'll be good to go as well. So we'll be talking about that a lot in a bit, I think.
I had no idea that there was such a thing as pre-registering. Is that something new, or is that something that's been around long enough that I'd never paid attention?
A couple of years. Sara, I don't know the exact date, but it's, I want to say 3 years.
Yeah, just about 3 years. Yeah, we've really been pushing for that. And I will confess why pre-registration is really important to me. I turned 18 October of my senior year of high school. So I was kind of an old senior. But I didn't know that you had to register. And of course, that November was the election. And I just thought, oh, you're automatically eligible to go to the polling place when you turn 18. So I missed my first election that I was eligible to vote in. So if you pre-register to vote, you won't be, a sucker like me, and you'll be able to get voting from the get-go.
All right, well then I'm going to open it up now that I've put poor Jewel on the spot. This is a great opportunity for you to ask some of these really basic questions, or maybe some very pertinent and complicated questions. So who has a question about what it is to vote, or what the policies and procedures are going to be this time around? Oliver, go for it.
So I'd like to first say that I'm actually turning 18 this October of my senior year, just like you, Sara. So I wanted to know, because I am pre-registered, my school did pre-registration. but I wanted to know how the mail-in ballots will work, if I will even be able to vote this year.
Okay, so I think the question is, because you are pre-registered and you don't turn 18 until October, will you automatically get the vote by mail ballot? Because everybody who is registered is going to receive a vote by mail ballot this time. They weren't in March, and the Secretary of State has ordered, and we all agree that it's a good idea for everybody to get a vote by mail ballot. But I don't have the specific answer to Oliver's question. Sarah, do you? Is if they are pre-registered
Yeah,
and they
so
turn 18 in time, will they automatically get the vote by mail ballot?
they will, yeah. So the same form gets filled out, whether you're 16 or 17 or 18. So if you filled out that paper form or you went online, the data entry people enter it into the same system. And it's just kind of like there's a little timer set there for your birthday. So as soon as the system knows that you're 18, you'll automatically be kicked in to receive that one. So the county says that those vote by mail ballots are going out to every registered voter. So that does include you, Oliver. And just to give you an idea of what the process is going to be like, you're going to receive kind of a packet, and inside that packet, you're going to have your physical ballot. It's going to be long form, kind of like a long legal paper. And depending how many contests are on there, it may be 3-4 pages long. So you're going to get a pen and just fill it out. Take your time filling it out. When you're done filling it out, you're also going to have a pre-posted envelope. That means a stamp is already on there. You don't have to go and find a stamp. And you can just put your completed ballot right back in the envelope. The envelope itself, this is really important, has some things to fill out. So you want to fill out that envelope completely. Make sure you sign and date the envelope before you seal it. And then to return it, you can just drop it off in your mailbox, or you can go to, a physical mailbox, maybe at the corner. The county is going to have close to 400 secure vote by mail drop boxes throughout the city. And a lot of them are going to be 24 hours. So if somebody, for instance, folks are maybe having a little bit of worry about the mail system and how that might be impacted by budgets and so on, you can go to a VBM drop box. That's a county secure box that's locked, and that box goes, the contents of that box goes directly to the county. So it actually doesn't even go in through the mail system. It just goes right to the county office. So those are your options on how to drop it off.
Speaking of, participation as far as youth are concerned, I know Andrea had a question about youth and participation in voting.
Yeah, I did have a question, especially since COVID's going on and a lot of seniors like Oliver and Jewel and all those other people will be online this year. I was wondering, how will the youth that are going to be juniors or seniors this upcoming year that are going to be online be able to knowingly access all of that information without it being sent directly to their school? Because that's how a lot of people find out about stuff that's going on in our communities and in our governments, is through the school telling us. So that was just my question about how the youth in schools coming up that will be able to find out about all this information.
I think that's a really good point. And I think that what we need to do on our own outreach team, both the county and the city of Los Angeles have their own voter outreach, but we need to, work together so that we're covering as many, bases as we can. But that's a really good suggestion, that we take some of our presentations virtual and we still take them to the schools if the schools will allow it. Do a presentation very much like we're doing today. And Sarah and the rest of the team have a bunch of videos and other type of graphics that can help with this process. Sarah, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, I will add and kind of repeat like what I said to Joel. It does kind of break my heart that we can't get out there. It's part of the job that I love the most, is getting in front of youth especially. So we are going to produce videos. We're going to have our posts on our social media. We're really active on our Instagram and our Facebook, and we produce videos that we upload to YouTube. So just like we've been doing the last few weeks, whether it was giving advice on how to stay safe during COVID, or other things that you've been sharing that really mean a lot to you, that's something that you can do and feel empowered to do, is to just share those things forward. And if you're sharing with maybe people who aren't too savvy with social media, just share a link directly through a text message. or even just call people. We can call and we can video chat with our family and just share the information that you found. So I really hope that we can share directly in classrooms like this with a meeting. That'd be wonderful. I know our teachers are really going to have their work cut out for them, and the students are as well, to try to stay focused and do well. But if we can get in there, I would love that. So we're just going to do whatever we can in whatever safest way we can, sharing videos, sharing links, sharing posts. And if you have an opportunity that you'd like us to, come and share something directly with you, we're open to that as well. So you can always contact us. We're at LA City Clerk on all of the handles. And if you have an idea how we can connect with a group of people that we'd love to do that. Even if you put together, maybe a meeting with your friends together, we could have a meeting like this just with them.
Oh, your own private election meeting. That's kind of exciting. Sean, where are you going to be in November? Are you going to be trying to be out of the area, or are you going to be here?
No, I'll be in the city.
Okay, yeah. So what are some of the priorities for you this election in terms of making sure that your voice is heard?
Well, I want to be sure that I understand the mail-in ballot system. I know there's a lot of controversy about it nationally, and I've obviously been hearing a lot about it in the news, but not a lot of factual information for how to vote as a resident of the city, or as a resident of California, even, these sort of things for November.
Okay, well, so one of the things that I can say on that is that you're very wise to question everything that you hear out there. Each state has its own set of rules. And one of the great things about California is that we prepay the postage, because I even myself seen some memes going back and forth about, making sure you have enough stamps. Well, if you do choose to vote by mail, there's a couple things. One is that the postage is prepaid. So you can just fill out the envelope, as Sara was describing earlier, and drop it into a mailbox or one of the drop boxes. But the key thing is you can also track your ballot. You are provided a number that will allow you to go online and you can see where your ballot is. Did the county registrar recorder receive it? Was your ballot counted? And it doesn't tie back to you. You're still anonymous as far as anybody's concerned. Nobody knows how you voted. It's just a number for you to have so that you can track your own ballot. Ballots are generally sent out about 29 days in advance of the election. And so I think it's important to read your voter information pamphlet and decide, how you want to vote on the different issues and know what the issues are. There's good information also online at the Secretary of State, or there are some nonpartisan groups that will help explain any issues that you may have questions on, or, you can always reach back out to us and we'll point you in the right direction. The city clerk is a nonpartisan office. We don't, endorse any measure or any candidate.
Interesting. Angelina, is the whole idea of the election, part of what your group is concerned about? I mean, is there some sort of energy around the people in your world about this upcoming election? And what are some of their concerns in regards to making sure their voice is heard?
Definitely. From my age category, who's too young to vote, we're definitely anxious to see the changes made by voters. But my family, one question that was brought up about the election is, because past elections you were allowed to hand in your ballot at a voting poll. You could fill it out at home and bring it into a voting poll. If that will still be allowed this election, if voting polls are open.
Yeah, are voting polls going to be open? And if they are, how's that going to work? And can you bring your ballot with you?
Yes, you can bring your ballot with you. The county's moved away from the precinct model. So you are no longer just assigned a single precinct. Instead, there are voting centers where any registered voter can go to any voting site. Voting center is what they're called. And if you have your ballot with you, you can surrender it there. Or if you didn't bring it with you, you can still vote, because they have electronic poll books where they look up to see whether you've already voted or not. And if you have not voted, then they issue you a ballot and you go to one of the ballot marking devices and complete your ballot. As far as the safety, that's what we're all very concerned about, is making sure that there are enough voting centers open for those who want to, to choose to vote in person, making sure that there are safety protocols in place for social distancing. What I'm primarily concerned about are the long lines. I don't want people to have to wait. I think that would, I don't think that's safe for anybody. And I don't think that it's a pleasant experience for those who want to vote. So it's making sure we have enough people to work at the different voting centers, making sure there's social distance and cleaning protocols. And for the youth that are not eligible yet to vote, there's still a lot you can do. You can get the word out. You can do exactly what you're doing right now, and that's getting involved. And if you have the information, as Sara said earlier, you can pass it on to others who that are eligible to vote. You can help them on, where to register to vote, where to go to vote. So by arming yourself with knowledge, I think you become a tremendous resource for others.
Evan, is this part of your world? Is this something you think about, or is this something you're looking at in the future?
Yes, so I'm not eligible to vote, but I just turned 16, so I'm definitely going to pre-register soon. And I actually know a lot of my friends last year that were already 16 were volunteering at the poll booths at our local elections. And I'm really excited to be able to start doing that at the next election because I just became eligible to do that.
Excellent.
So Holly, how will that work with these voting centers with volunteers?
Well, it would be through the county, but I'm going to turn that question over to Sara.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the past, Holly mentioned that we had a precinct model, which meant every kind of neighborhood, so to speak, or precinct would have a polling place, but now we have moved to vote centers. So there are hundreds of vote centers throughout the county, and the key part of that is that you have expanded early voting, and every voter can go to any polling place, any vote center. So that really created a lot of flexibility. But Evan, that did kind of change that the number of volunteers needed is now a little bit different, and the role that they play is a little bit different. But I will say, for anybody who doesn't qualify to vote in an election, whether that's because of their age or their status, there are so many things that you can still do that actually make a great, great, great impact. As we were saying, you can help people register to vote. So you don't have to actually be a registered voter to help turn out the vote. So sharing the link to the Secretary of State website, encouraging everyone that you know who's 16 or 17 to pre-register, everyone that you know who's 18 and older to register. And here's the really big one. Everyone that you know who's registered to vote, make sure they go and check their registration to make sure that the address is correct. A lot of times people move and they forget to update their voter registration because they're under the impression that it's automatic, and it's not. So if we're all supposed to be mailed a vote by mail ballot, it's going to be kind of important that we have the right address on file, right? So, I mean, today, that's something that you can do in your household today. Make sure all of your older brothers and sisters, parents, aunts, uncles, all have their voter registration up to date with the right address to make sure that their ballot gets to them. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, just sharing the links. But this is a really big one. Something that comes to your house is the voter guide, like Holly mentioned. Just because you're not going to cast a ballot doesn't mean that you can't peruse that voter guide and circle things that are important to you and do your own research and share that information with your parents, with your older brothers and sisters, and tell them, hey, there's issues that are important to me in this election. I wish I could vote, but I can't. But you can, and I expect you to. Okay, so don't discount how powerful that is to tell people, I can't vote, but you can, and I expect you to. Okay, we're just going to say that one over and over till November 3rd, okay?
So I have a poll question for our young people. How many of you are going to be, that can vote in this particular election, are going to be at your home residence during this November's election?
You mean as opposed to away at school?
Exactly. Any of you going to be away at school during this? Okay. So what happens then? I mean, where do they go? What do they do? What if they don't get their mail-in ballot and they're away at school? How is that all working out?
Well, there's still plenty of time. The deadline to register to vote isn't until October. So right now, Just like you're going to go and talk to your household, go and talk to all of your friends who are college age and you know they're away from home, or maybe you know they returned from maybe their dorm or their apartment from their college, their college place. So what you can do is go online and, like I said, check the registration. That's going to be at voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. Okay, that lets you look up your voter registration. You want to know what the home address is versus the mailing address. Okay, so if you decided that you were going to stay a Los Angeles voter, but let's say I was away at school at Arizona State University, then I might have put my home address as my Los Angeles address and my mailing address as my address, let's say at my apartment or my dorm in Arizona, so that I could have my LA ballot mailed to me, right? But maybe perhaps because of COVID, I've now come back home. I need to go there and update my mailing address to be my home address so that I get my ballot mailed to me here in Los Angeles. Okay, so that's what you want to do, is you want to look up voter status.sos.ca.gov and just make sure that the mailing address is the one that you want for this coming November.
And what's your deadline on that? What happens if you look it up and it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to Arizona and I'm not there?
Okay. That's okay. The Vote by Mail ballots are not being sent out yet.
Okay.
The deadline to register to vote is, I believe, October 19th. So you still have time, and you still have time to share that information with other people to make sure that their ballot's going to where they want it to go.
Just the worst case scenario is you could always vote provisionally if you end up, say, in Sarah's scenario where you have your ballot mailed to Arizona and you end up being here, you could always go to the vote center and they would issue you a new ballot. Or if something happens with your registration, don't ever let anybody turn you away at a vote center. You have the right to vote provisionally. If you are 18 years or older, you have the right to vote. So, demand a provisional ballot in the worst case scenario.
And then they just check it after the fact, right? But one of the questions I was curious about is, all right, so we haven't hit the deadlines yet, but eventually we will. In fact, if we blink and breathe a little too fast, we're going to be there. So now, what's the timeline of the last moment you can actually try to get your mail-in ballot? What's the last time you can mail your mail-in ballot? I mean, what's that parameter of time?
Yeah, so the ballots will start to go out probably, I think, before the deadline to register, because it will be in some waves. There's quite a lot of them to mail out. But the deadline to register and have your ballot mailed to you is October 19th. So after that, you can still vote. We have at-poll conditional voter registration and voting, meaning if you miss the deadline, you can still go to a vote center and they'll help you register to vote and vote conditionally there. Conditional voting is pretty much the same thing as provisional voting. It's similar, meaning your ballot's just going to go in an envelope. That envelope's going to go to Norwalk, and they're going to verify that you are registered before opening it and counting your ballot.
And if you mail it in, though, you have to mail it in within X days of an election? 7?
Yes, so your vote by mail ballot just has to be postmarked by election day and received by the county registrar's office within 17 days of the election.
So, Andrea, what are some of your concerns about this year's election from a voting perspective? Obviously, we all have our concerns about policy and some of our electoral candidates, et cetera. But what are some of the things that you're worried about when it comes to actually making sure that this is a good election for everyone?
Some of my concerns for the upcoming election is just that I know when I was going into high school and my uncle was actually graduating, he had turned 18. He didn't feel the need to vote. And it just concerns me that a lot of people my age and maybe older will feel the same way, that they don't think that their votes count because it goes through the electoral college and stuff like that. So it worries me to think that, especially because I just turned 18 in July, that people that graduated with me or maybe a year or two older will also feel that same need that my uncle did when he decided to vote, and that they won't register in time, or that they just won't know, or especially just not feel the need. So those are some of my concerns with the upcoming election.
That sounds valid and very, but your point is valid. With the electoral college, that's at a certain level, but The idea that so many other things are at stake that may not be affected by the Electoral College. So, you know, what do you say, Sara? How do you approach young people who are worried that their vote won't count because there are these mechanics in place?
Yeah, well, Andrea, I will say that it's not just your age group that is afflicted with voter apathy. I'm 35 and I still have a hard time convincing people that I went to high school with that voting is important, believe it or not. So the thing is that a lot of times people get stuck on the one big exciting race, which of course this year is a presidential election, and it is incredibly important, but it is still not the only thing on the ballot. There's something that is important to everyone on the ballot. You know, we're voting for people, yes, on the federal level, on the state, on the county, on the city level. So if things like, for instance, on the city level, if you are someone who enjoys, you know, your recreation and parks or your libraries or other things and that the city provides for you, those things are dreamt of and placed in a budget and cared for and fostered by people who are elected on the city level. So when people wonder, well, why should I care who the mayor is, or why should I care who city council is? You know, those are the things that actually affect your everyday life, right? The people who are keeping your street lighting lit so that you feel safe walking to your car, all these really important quality of life things. So I really encourage you at this age to pay attention to who is your city government, how are they working for you, why is it important to care about who they are, and then on the state level as well, who's going to Sacramento and making laws? Because here's the thing that people tend to not understand is that not voting still has a consequence. Whether or not you vote for a lawmaker, they make a law and you still have to follow the law, right? So whether or not you voted for them, the law is now in place and you are now, you know, beholden to that law. So you're affected whether or not you choose to cast a ballot. Something that I learned at a later age that's really important are that we vote for things like judges. I never really knew that. I honestly probably skimmed over that for a long time, but something like a judge, so important, right? So there's a lot of things, not just one race on the ballot. There's something for everyone to care about. And like I mentioned before, grab that voter guide and start doing some research. And if there's things on the ballot that maybe you're not ready to vote for, or your parent says, you know what, I didn't have enough time to do my election homework, I didn't do enough research, that is no reason to not cast a ballot. You can mark your ballot for the races or the contests that you're ready to vote for. And it's okay to skip things on a ballot if you're not ready to vote for them. We want to, in an ideal world, we all had hours and hours of time to do our research and we're so well informed, right? But please don't let that be a reason that you don't cast a ballot because you're not ready. Just vote for the things that you're ready for and cast a ballot. Have something to say about the things that are important to you.
Sean, I imagine you're already ready right now.
I've done a little bit of research, but not as much as I should, I'd say.
So what are the areas in an election that you are most interested in? I mean, are you looking at the national scale, or are you, as Sara spoke, all of the local issues and even to positions you may not realize you were voting for, like judges, et cetera?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's shakier the more local I get, which is confusing because local politics is hugely important. And like, I'm aware of, you know, I live in Mike Bonin's district. And so I'm aware of all these sorts of issues that are coming up locally. I don't know all the ones that are going to be reflected as, you know, legislations or referenda on a ballot. But as I get further up into the state level, I'm looking out for, I think it's AB 345. I'm looking to see if there's anything to do with Governor Newsom on the ballot. I think maybe there will be a recall measure on that. I'm curious to learn more about that movement. And AB 5, of course. And then some of the criminal justice reform laws I have looked into in the past. And then, of course, the national. Yeah, looking forward to, you know, investigating all those options that I have thoroughly. And there are fewer options to get towards the top, in my opinion, but lots to learn.
Wow. And that's why you're all here. I mean, Evan, even though you can't, you know, what are some of the things that you're paying attention to, even though you will not have the opportunity this time around?
Yeah, I didn't know that these judges we were voting for them in this election. And I know that myself and all my peers are very aware of what's happening in our judicial system right now, especially in California with, DACA and all of these children are being detained at our border and, representing themselves in court. And the fact that voting is a way to choose who these judges are that are making these big decisions. And with Black Lives Matter, we're paying a lot of attention to the judicial system right now. So that's great for me to hear, and that I can, pass that information along to my peers who are of voting age.
Thanks. Jewel, I'm going to ask you, and this isn't a trick question, but you've been such a good sport with some of the things I've asked you. Do you know what the word ballot measure means?
I do not.
Okay. Well, how about if we learn what a ballot measure is? That would be awesome. Holly, Sarah?
Well, a ballot measure is those items on the ballot by which you're voting on a law, basically. And there's various tax type of measures which have to do with that you'll see. For example, the one that everybody talks about in the past was Prop 13. And there's a state ballot measure on this time that will ask us all whether we want to revise the decisions that were made back in the 80s. So there's various ways for a ballot measure to get on the ballot. They're a local body such as the city council or the board of supervisors can put a measure on the ballot. Then citizens can petition and have a measure put on the ballot. And that's basically, it's the question, do you want X, Y, and Z law, or do you want X, Y, and Z tax? And there's different rules for different things as far as the number required to pass. Most laws that do not have to do with taxes are you need 50% plus one of those people who vote to pass. But then there are more stringent requirements on some of the tax laws. Sarah's a much better teacher than I am, though, so
that's not true.
Sarah.
Well, I suppose if I was going to try to make it really simple, I just say, ballot measurements and propositions, you want to think of it like Holly said, as proposed laws, or asking you, how do you want us to use your money? So, when we pay into taxes, they're used in a certain way, right? They're written into a budget, they're spent on something. And ideally, we want that budget to reflect what our values are, right? We want them to be spending money on things that are important to us. And even some things that don't directly affect us, like perhaps maybe we don't use a certain service, but we think that service is really important for a lot of people who do use it, for example. So you want to think of a proposition as a measure, as your government asking you permission to pass a law or to use your money. Do you want us to use your money in this way? And what's really interesting is that the groups or people who put forth these proposed things on a ballot, there's always an argument for, and then sometimes somebody will submit an argument against, and then somebody will submit a rebuttal and say they'll argue back, and they'll go back and forth. One time I was recording for our audio ballot, and I think I probably went back and forth 5 or 6 times. So there was an argument, and then an argument for that one, and an argument for that one. So it's really fun to really look into it and see what do these people want to ask me? Because they're asking me my opinion on if I want to say yes or no on a law, or I want to use money this way.
I saw Andrea might have a question.
Yes, I actually did. Since you mentioned taxes, I know there's a couple of taxes that do go through, and especially there was one that was actually mentioned by my mom since we own apartments, and that there was a tax that was supposedly trying to be used against bigger corporations, but it affects people that own smaller businesses, smaller apartments that are just for their communities. I was wondering if those taxes go on our ballots to be able to vote for, or how we would be able to vote on those taxes so that they won't be put in place, especially since they affect so many smaller companies and people that own their own little businesses and stuff.
Well,
go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that whether it's something that somebody in Sacramento or in Washington is proposing to be a law, or it's a ballot measurement that got put on by a group or citizens, the writing of laws is pretty imperfect, right? So if, for instance, they left a loophole for a smaller business owner, or let's say somebody who owns less property, to be affected, then perhaps this wasn't the way it was written that you want it, right? So you see the overall idea you agree with, but perhaps it's written imperfectly to now include a group of people that you think shouldn't be. So, I mean, that's what you have to think about when you vote yes or no, right? And so I would say that they're imperfect, and maybe you hope, I like this idea, but it's not quite right. Maybe next time around, right? So to not be too specific, that's pretty much how it goes. If somebody proposes it, they propose it as it is, and you have to decide: do I want it as is, or do I want to maybe defeat it and come back around and try and do it in a different way?
You made me think of something. Angelina, where do you get your information? Because obviously you mentioned your family and some of their concerns earlier in our conversation. So where are you getting your information that you think is applicable to what could happen in the next election?
Yeah, it's definitely hard to find like trustworthy, solid information from like the media, like especially social media. So I try to look towards reliable news, and most of it comes from my family, but I try to like filter and like contrast and see what they're telling me versus what I'm hearing from the news. And so that basically forms my judgments, and that's where I get my information from.
Got it. Oliver, I'm wondering about you, because you seem to be pretty focused on a lot of things. So where are you looking, especially when it comes to something that's important?
So I actually found a pretty cool website. Am I allowed to say? Well, I found a website.
We'll just beep you if it's really bad.
Yeah, it's called allsides.com, and essentially what it does is it compiles different news sources. So if it's news it literally says news from the left, the center, and the right. So you'll have your like more Republican news channels and your more Democratic, and then your more moderate. So what I'll do is I'll read an article from each side, so I can see like all sides of their opinions, and then I'll pull from that what I agree with or what I believe. So it kind of gives me a bigger picture than what just reading one article will give me.
So I'm going to ask then Holly and Sara, that is broad scale in terms of policy, et cetera. But when it comes to getting information about local elections and ballot measures, what's the best place for everyone to do their research so that they can feel as if they're walking into the election with an educated understanding of what it is that they're voting for?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate Oliver's approach. I think that's really smart. Generally, there are no, for November at least, there are no city measures on the ballot this particular time. The county is in the process of putting a measure on, and I myself don't know what they all are, but if you go to the Secretary of State website, you can see all of the measures that are currently, or propositions that are currently qualified for the ballot, and you can start your research pretty much as Oliver described. You need to find news sources that are reliable, and organizations such as the League of Women Voters are a nonpartisan group. If you want to get just the straight information without the slant, then you want to find those nonpartisan groups that can just provide you factual information. And then, as Oliver stated, read from all sides, read different opinions, so that you can have a more informed approach.
Well, speaking of, I see that Sean would like to ask something.
I wanted to say, I was literally looking right before this call at a website called Cal Matters, and I went to the About page, and it's listed as a nonpartisan, nonprofit journalism venture committed to explaining how California's state capitol works and why it matters. And then it actually has a breakdown for the, there's an article that I could probably talk about. Props to you, Californians, a preview of what's on your November ballot that just came out last month, or 2 months ago now, June 29th. But anyway, I like Cal Matters a lot because I used to have to look at it for my my internship, and I still read Cal Matters because I find that they have a lot of trusted correspondents and people talking about the California issues on a broad level, and they'll go into the local level as needed.
Great. Well, I know the clerk's office, the city clerk's office, you know, handles a lot of the neighborhood councils, et cetera, and that sort of thing. But what I would like to do is, if anyone has a question for Sara or Holly, we don't have a lot of time, but this is really your opportunity to jump in without any kind of management on my side. So does anybody have anything that they need to, oh, Jewel.
So while we're talking about these websites, do you guys have any recommendations that would be good to learn about the props and the candidates?
So the city, the county, and the state all produce kind of a voter guide, whether that's called voter information pamphlet or voter guide. You might have seen them come to your house, right? So even if you're not voting, maybe they came to other voters in your house. Sometimes they're like a half-page size booklet. Sometimes it's a big full-page size one. That Secretary of State one, it's like thin gray recycled paper. You know that one? Okay. Problem is, most people just throw it in the trash because we have so many things coming in during election time, right? We have all these postcards, all of these candidates and propositions are sending us information, and it kind of gets lost in the mix. So number one, I would say, be that person who catches them before they go in the trash. Be the person of your house who catches the voter guide, the sample ballot, and just collects them, even if you just have one copy, right? I get my sample ballot and I get a pen. And if there's people or things I have questions about, I kind of start marking it up. And that's kind of like where I take my notes. And like I said, some of those are going to have arguments for and against a proposition, but those arguments are submitted by the proponents or the opponents of the proposition or the measure, right? So they have, you know, a reason that they're arguing that way. So you can take those arguments for what they are, right? Also, candidates are welcome to submit candidate statements. But again, if I was running, I would say some really, really nice things about myself in my candidate statement too, right? So not quite fact, it's definitely opinion, but it's my trying to sell myself to you, right? So there's that. And then, like Holly mentioned, the League of Women Voters and other non-partisan nonprofits that a few of your companions today have mentioned. I like to listen to the radio, and I like to pick up a few different newspapers. I think as you read different sources, you kind of start to get a feel of which way they lean, and you can kind of understand this one's a little more right, this one's a little more left, and you just understand that when you go back to refer to them. One thing that really helped me back talking about judges is KPCC, the local public radio, had a interview with a lot of the people who were running for judges a few elections ago. And that really helped me because that in particular is a category that's really hard to find information about people. And so I really enjoyed listening to those interviews of those candidates for judgeships. You get to hear the tones in their voice. You get to hear, you know, either their, you know, passion or lack of passion about a certain question. So that really helped me out a lot. Their voter guide, I think, is called, oh gosh, I'm not sure what it's called, but KPCC, voter game plan. That's what they called it. KPCC voter game plan. That one helped me out a lot.
What would you offer our wonderful guests as your parting words?
Well, just thank you. Thank you for being involved. Thank you for caring. You know, continue to do that. If you have any questions, all of our email addresses are firstname.lastname@lacity.org. So we're happy to help. But we really applaud that you guys are out in your communities and that you care and that you have these questions. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, and thank you all. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more elections because we got a little bit of time before it actually happens, but this is a great foundation to get things rocking. So I look forward to seeing you all again. Angelina, Andrea, Oliver, Jewel, Evan, Sean, and of course our wonderful guests, Holly and Sara. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this edition of Protest and Promise.